Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today we're focusing on something well, it's pretty much everywhere. It sits in your pocket, on your desk, and probably in your car's dashboard.
Oh, definitely in your car.
Right. But you likely never actually see it. We've been calling it the invisible engine, but honestly, even that metaphor feels a bit light.
It really is. I mean, if you just took the semiconductor industry out of the equation, you wouldn't just lose your phone.
No.
You'd lose, the power grid, modern banking, medical imaging. The entire world would just stop.
And what's so fascinating to me, for something so absolutely critical, is the scale of it. The scale is almost, well, it's impossible to really comprehend.
It is.
I'm going to start exactly there.
Yeah.
With the scale, because we have these numbers from the source material, and I feel like we usually just read them and kind of move on, but let's pause.
Okay.
In 2021 alone, semiconductor sales hit a record $555.9 billion.
$500 billion.
$500 billion. Flowing through this one very specific sector in 12 months.
And, that's just the revenue. The number that really gets me, the one that keeps me up at night, is the volume.
Okay.
In that same year, the industry shipped 1.15 trillion units.
1.15 trillion.
Trillion, with a T.
Let's break that down for a second.
Yeah, so there are, roughly 8 billion people on the planet?
About that, yeah.
If you do the math on that, it means the industry produced something like 140 semiconductor devices for every single man, woman, and child on Earth.
In 1 year.
In 1 year.
That's just, it's absurd. I mean, I have a phone, a laptop.
Yeah.
But I definitely don't have 140 new devices.
Yeah.
So where are they all going?
Well, they're everywhere. They're in the obvious places for sure, but they're also in your washing machine, your credit card.
The greeting card that plays a song when you open it.
Exactly. The thermostat on your wall. We've basically reached a point where we are manufacturing these incredibly complex microscopic structures as if they were, grains of rice.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive, isn't it? We need to figure out how we got here. How did we go from a lab experiment to this global machine that just churns out 1 trillion units a year? And the journey it's not a straight line.
Not at all.
It involves a $25,000 license fee that literally changed the world. And it ends with factories that cost almost $20 billion apiece.
Which creates this really strange paradox. The end product, the chip itself, is cheap and ubiquitous. You can buy one for pennies.
Right.
But the machine that makes it is the most expensive, most complex, and most concentrated industrial system humanity has ever built.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
And I think we have to start at the beginning. The source material calls this the spark. We're going back to 1948.
Right. Bell Labs. This is the post-war era, a time of massive scientific optimism. And you've got 3 scientists, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley.
And what are they working on?
They're trying to solve a really basic problem, how to amplify electrical signals and how to switch them on and off. At the time, we were using vacuum tubes for this.
Vacuum tubes. So these are the glowing glass bulbs you see in old radios and things like that.
Exactly. And they were, to be blunt, they were terrible. Objectively speaking.
How so?
Well, they were bulky, they got incredibly hot, they burned out constantly, and they used a massive amount of power. You couldn't build a smartphone with a vacuum tube, so it would be the size of a skyscraper.
And need a nuclear power plant to run.
Pretty much, yeah.
So these 3 guys at Bell Labs, they invent the transistor.
They invent a solid-state device that can do everything a vacuum tube can do, but it's made from a tiny piece of germanium and later silicon.
So no moving parts, no filament to burn out.
Right. It doesn't need to warm up. It's small. It's reliable. It is, and this is no exaggeration, the fundamental building block of the digital age.
Now, here is the part of the story that I found genuinely shocking when we were doing the research.
Mm-hmm.
Bell Labs is part of AT&T. A massive corporation. They've just invented the golden ticket. Right. You would assume they'd lock this down, patent to the hilt, and sue anyone who even looked at it funny.
That's the standard corporate playbook, for sure. But they didn't do that. They did something that seems almost insane by modern standards. They decided to license the technology.
And not for $1 billion.
No. For $25,000.
$25,000? I mean, even if you adjust for inflation, that is peanuts.
It's the price of a mid-range sedan today.
For the keys to the entire future of electronics. Why? Why on earth did they do that?
There are a few theories, but the end result is what really matters. By setting that price so low, they removed the barrier to entry. If they'd charged $1 million, maybe only a company like GE or RCA gets in the game. But at 25 grand,
Everyone could play.
everyone could afford a ticket to the dance.
And looking at the timeline in the source, it seems like everyone really did jump in.
Immediately. It kicked off what I like to call the Silicon Rush. By 1952, Motorola bought a license. By 55, Shockley leaves Bell Labs to start his own company. You have Texas Instruments, Fairchild Semiconductor, Sylvania. I mean, the floodgates just opened.
It's just such a great example of how open innovation, or at least accessible innovation, can accelerate an entire field.
Absolutely. If Bell Labs had kept that secret, we might still have been using vacuum tubes well into the 60s, maybe even longer.
But there was still a big problem, right? The transistor was great, but you still had to wire them all together by hand.
Right. That was the tyranny of numbers, as it was called. If you wanted to build a computer, you had to physically solder thousands of these tiny little components together on a board.
Which sounds slow and expensive.
And unreliable. If just one of those solder joints failed, the whole thing died. It was a massive bottleneck.
Which leads us to the next huge leap forward, 1958.
The year of the integrated circuit, the IC.
And this is another one of those weird historical coincidences where two people basically solve the same puzzle at the same time.
Yeah, Jack Kilby at Texas Instruments and Robert Noyce over at Fairchild Semiconductor, they both independently figure out that you don't need to solder discrete parts together.
What's the alternative?
You can manufacture the entire circuit, all the transistors, the resistors, the capacitors, all of it, on a single monolithic slice of semiconductor material.
A chip.
A chip. This is the birth of the modern semiconductor. And this invention is what really unlocked Moore's Law.
Moore's Law. Okay, we hear this term thrown around all the time. Computers get faster every 2 years. But what does it actually mean, in the context of this industry?
So Gordon Moore, who was one of the co-founders of Intel, he just made an observation. He noticed that because of this new manufacturing technique, the number of transistors we could cram onto a single chip was doubling roughly every 2 years.
And crucially, because you're fitting more on that same piece of silicon.
The cost per transistor plummets.
So it's a prophecy of exponential growth. And the source material gives us these data points on process nodes that, frankly, are a little hard to visualize. So I want to walk through them.
Let's do it.
Okay, we start in 1968. The process node is 20 micrometers.
Okay, so a micrometer is a millionth of a meter. 20 micrometers. That's about the size of a very fine dust particle, or a wool fiber. It's small, but in the world of microscopy, it's a boulder.
Then we jump forward just 6 years to 1974. We're at 6 micrometers.
So we shrunk it by more than half. This is the era of, the early arcade games, the very first home computers.
Then 1987, we break the micrometer barrier. We are now at 800 nanometers.
A nanometer is a billionth of a meter. We are now operating at a scale that is smaller than most bacteria. This is the late 80s boom, the 386 and 486 processors.
And the free fall really begins. 2014, we hit 14 nanometers. 2020, 5 nanometers. And just in 2022, 3 nanometers.
3 nanometers. To put that in perspective for you, your fingernail grows about 1 nanometer every single second.
Wow.
We are building structures that are only a few times larger than a single strand of DNA.
It breaks my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
We are manufacturing things at a near atomic scale. And we're not just making 1 or 2 in a pristine lab somewhere.
Yeah. No, we're making trillions of them.
Trillion.
And that really is the miracle. It's not just that we can do it, it's that we can do it reliably, billions of times over for a few dollars.
I like the analogy you used before we started, the car analogy.
Oh, right. Imagine if the automotive industry worked like this. Imagine if a Rolls-Royce got twice as fast, twice as safe, and half as expensive every 2 years for 50 years.
What would that look like today?
By now, a Rolls-Royce would cost a nickel, go the speed of light, and fit in your pocket.
That's a great way to put it, but it also highlights the incredible pressure. I mean, if you're a car company and you don't release a new model this year, you're fine. But in this industry, if you miss that 2-year cycle,
you're dead, or you're at least severely wounded. The entire industry is built on this innovate or die treadmill. And that relentless pressure has completely reshaped how the business actually works.
Which brings us perfectly to our next section, how the industry actually works. Because the way these companies are organized today is very, very different from how they were organized back in the days of Jack Kilby and Robert Noyce.
Drastically different. In the beginning, let's say pre-1980s, the industry ran on what we call vertical integration.
The do-it-all-yourself model.
Exactly. We call these companies IDMs, integrated device manufacturers. And if you were an IDM in 1970, You did everything. You designed the chip's architecture,
Right.
you owned the land, you built the factory, you purified the silicon, you even built the furnaces and the lithography tools yourself because nobody else was selling them yet.
You bake the bread from scratch,
Yeah.
starting with growing the wheat.
That's a perfect analogy.
It just sounds incredibly inefficient by modern standards. You have to be an expert in logic design and chemistry and structural engineering and supply chain management all at once.
It was inefficient, but it was necessary because that specialized supply chain just didn't exist yet. But as the technology got more and more complex, it became basically impossible for one company to be the best at everything.
So the industry fractures. It specializes. And this is really crucial for you, the listener, to understand, because when you look at the stock market today, you see names like NVIDIA and TSMC, and they do completely different things.
Right. We moved to a specialized model, and you essentially have three types of players now. First, you still have the IDMs, the survivors.
So who are the big ones left that still do everything?
The two big ones are Samsung in South Korea and Intel in the United States. They still cling to that old model. We design it and we build it.
Okay, so that's group one. Then you have group two, the fabless companies.
Fabless, meaning they have no fabrication plant, no factory. These are companies like Qualcomm, NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom.
Even Apple with their M-series chip.
Even Apple fits here.
So what do they actually do if they're not building anything?
They deal in pure intellectual property. They hire thousands of brilliant engineers to essentially draw the blueprints. They figure out exactly how the electrons should flow to make your video game look realistic or your AI model run faster. But they don't own a single furnace.
I can see the business appeal there. You don't have to spend billions on concrete and highly specialized equipment. You just need computers and smart people.
Exactly.
But if NVIDIA just draws the picture, who actually builds the chip?
And that is group three, the foundries. These are the pure play manufacturers.
The workhorses.
The printing presses. Their entire business model is, you send us the design, we will build it for you. They don't design their own chips to compete with you, they just manufacture.
And the undisputed king of this model is TSMC.
Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They are the absolute titan of this space, along with UMC, also in Taiwan, and Global Foundries, which has more of a U.S. and global footprint.
This separation seems like genius in a way. It allows a company like NVIDIA to start up in a garage, metaphorically, and become a trillion-dollar giant without ever pouring a foundation for a factory.
It massively lowered the barrier to entry for design, but, and this is the crucial catch, it massively raised the barrier to entry for manufacturing.
Right. And this leads us directly to the high cost of poker. Because I'm looking at the costs of these factories, these fabs, and the numbers are just staggering.
They're astronomical. Let's look at the data point in the source for TSMC's latest expansion. To build a factory capable of producing those 3-nanometer chips we talked about, a factory they completed in 2020, the price tag was $19.5 billion.
$19.5 billion for one building.
One facility. To give you some context, you could build a dozen Burj Khalifas for that price.
You could build a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier and still have billions of dollars left over.
Exactly.
So why? Why does it cost that much? What is in that building?
A lot of it is the equipment and the environment. You need clean rooms that are thousands of times cleaner than a hospital operating theater.
Because a single speck of dust on a 3-nanometer wafer.
It destroys the chip. It's a killer.
Wow.
And then the machines themselves, the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, the EUV machines you need for this work, they cost about $150 million each. And you need rows and rows of them.
So logically, this just creates a massive moat. I can't just wake up tomorrow and say, hey, I think I'll start a foundry to compete with TSMC.
Impossible. You need nation-state levels of capital. And because that cost is so high, the number of companies who can actually afford to play this game has just shrunk and shrunk.
The consolidation.
Exactly. If you look at the cutting edge, the absolute smallest, most advanced nodes, there are only 3 companies left in the entire world that can do it.
Who are they?
TSMC, Samsung, and Intel.
That's the list.
That's the whole list. Everyone else is tapped out.
And even on that short list, there's a lot of drama. Intel, which for decades was the undisputed king, seems to be stumbling.
Stumbling might be putting it politely. The source material highlights a major potential shift here. Intel is seriously considering outsourcing some of its production to TSMC.
Wait, pause on that for a second. Intel is an IDM. Their whole identity, their marketing slogan for years was, real men have fabs.
Yeah.
If they outsource to TSMC, isn't that just admitting defeat?
It's a huge strategic concession. The data shows that Intel got stuck. They got stuck at the 10-nanometer node. They had yield issues. They couldn't get the manufacturing recipe right. And meanwhile, TSMC and Samsung just sailed right past them to 7 nanometers and then 5.
So Intel, the American giant, fell a full generation behind the technology curve.
And in this industry, being a generation behind is catastrophic for your economics. So to keep their products competitive, they might have to use their biggest competitors' factories.
That's a tectonic shift in the power dynamic of the industry.
Yeah.
It really shows how unbelievably difficult this manufacturing process actually is.
It's not just about throwing money at it, it's about deep institutional knowledge. And look at Global Foundries. They're a major player, a big company.
Right.
But they looked at the R&D cost of developing 7-nanometer technology, the cost of all that new EUV equipment, and they just said, nope.
They just quit the race for the cutting edge.
They stopped development entirely. They made a strategic decision to settle on 12 nanometer as their best node. They realized they could make plenty of money making slightly older, but still critical, chips for cars and appliances. And they let the big three fight it out over the bleeding edge.
It's a rational business decision, but it means we are putting all of our most advanced eggs in very, very few baskets. Which brings us to the geography of all this. Section 4. Market dynamics. Because if there are only a few key players, where they are located suddenly matters a whole lot.
Oh, geography is destiny in the chip world. And if you look at the history, it's really been a game of musical chairs.
The source has this great ranking data. Let's go back to 1985. Who was on top of the world then?
Japan. In 1985, the #1 semiconductor company in the world was NEC, followed by Texas Instruments, then Motorola. But then at number 4 and 5, you have Hitachi and Toshiba.
So 3 of the top 5 were Japanese companies. Where was Intel?
Intel was number 8.
Wow. So back in the 80s, everyone must have been writing books and articles about how Japan was going to dominate the digital future forever.
They absolutely were. But look what happened. The industry shifted. By 1995, Intel shoots up to number 1. NEC and the others start to drop.
And by 2011...
By 2011, the landscape looks totally different again. Intel is still number 1, but Samsung has risen all the way to number 2, and TSMC, the foundry, enters the top charts at number 3.
And the Japanese giants have largely fallen off that top tier.
For the most part, yeah.
And what about the most recent data from 2021?
2021 shows the dominance of this new order. Samsung actually took the number 1 spot for revenue, Intel dropped to number 2, and SK Hynix, another Korean firm specializing in memory, is number 3.
So the center of gravity has really shifted from Japan to the US, South Korea, and Taiwan.
Precisely. You have these specialized hubs. The U.S. leads in design, the fabless companies, and has a strong IDM with Intel. Taiwan completely dominates manufacturing with the foundries, and South Korea dominates memory.
And then you have China, which is the big rising challenger.
China is spending a massive amount of money to catch up. In 2021, sales in China reached almost $200 billion. They have a huge internal market. But they're still fighting against that massive barrier to entry on the manufacturing side with companies like SMIC.
Now, I want to clarify something for you. We keep saying semiconductors and chips as a kind of catch-all term, but are we just talking about computer processors here? Because the outline mentions a product breakdown that suggests it's a lot more diverse than that.
Yeah, this is a really common misconception. We all tend to obsess over the CPU, the central processing unit, because, it's the brain of the computer.
Right.
But if you look at the revenue pie from 2017, microprocessors were only about 16% of the total market.
Only 16%. So what's the biggest chunk?
Memory.
Memory, like RAM and hard drives.
Exactly. Memory chips accounted for 30% of the market. That's $124 billion. Every single device needs short-term memory, which is DRAM, and long-term storage, NAND flash. It's a commodity, but it's a massive, massive one.
Okay, so memory is number 1, and the source says logic is number 2.
Right. Logic is about 25%. And these are your special purpose processors, chips that run your graphics card or handle networking or other specific tasks.
And then there's this category called discretes. This sounds like the junk drawer of the industry.
It's not junk. It's the glue that holds everything together. Discrete devices are single-function components.
So like one transistor by itself.
One transistor, one diode, one rectifier. These aren't supercomputers, they're simple little switches or valves for electricity.
But the volume must be.
The volume is staggering. In 2018, the industry shipped 62.8 billion discrete transistors. In 2014, they shipped 154 billion diodes.
154 billion diodes.
Think of them as the nails and screws of the electronic world. You don't marvel at a nail, but you can't build a house without thousands and thousands of them.
So when we hear about chip shortages stopping a car factory, it's not always the high-end $1,000 brain chip that's missing.
A lot of the time it isn't. Sometimes it's the 10-cent diode that stops the entire production line. It's a highly interconnected ecosystem. If you run out of the cheap stuff, the expensive stuff is just a paperweight.
I also want to touch on the volatility that the source mentions. Because we have this picture of an industry that just goes up and up and up. But the notes say it has dramatic cyclical swings.
It's an absolute roller coaster. The long-term average growth is strong, about 13% over 20 years. But year to year, it can be brutal.
Why, though? I mean, everyone always needs more chips. Why would sales crash?
It's the inventory cycle. Because products become obsolete so fast, remember that innovate or die, treadmill companies are terrified of having too much inventory of an old chip. But then when demand spikes, like it did during COVID, they all panic and double order from the foundries.
Creating a huge boom.
A massive boom, which is followed by an inevitable bust when everyone realizes they have warehouses full of chips they don't need.
So it's a boom and bust business with a $20 billion entry fee. That sounds stressful.
It requires, as the source puts it, high degrees of flexibility. You have to be able to turn that $20 billion factory on and off, figuratively speaking, to match the wild swings of the market.
Okay, so let's try to bring all this together. We have an industry that started with a almost benevolent licensing deal in 1948.
Right, the $25,000 spark.
That spark ignited a revolution. It shrank technology from the size of a dust mote to the size of a DNA strand, following Moore's law.
For 50 years.
It consolidated from a free-for-all into a high-stakes poker game played by only 3 giants. And now, it underpins $555 billion in direct annual sales.
And that's just the direct sales. The source also mentions that global technology industry sales were expected to hit $5 trillion in 2019. That entire $5 trillion rests completely on this semiconductor foundation.
It really is the invisible engine. But as we look to the future, I have to ask the provocative question. Can this go on forever?
That is the big question, isn't it? We are starting to approach the physical limits of silicon. You get to 3 nanometers, then 2 nanometers. Eventually, you run into the size of the atom itself.
You can't make a transistor smaller than an atom.
You can't. And then there are the economics. If the next generation factory costs $20 billion today, will the one after that cost $50 billion, $100 billion?
Exactly. We might reach a point where Moore's law stops, not because of the laws of physics, but because of the laws of economics. It simply becomes too expensive to take the next step.
And if only one company on Earth can afford to build that next factory, do you even have a market anymore? Or do you have a global monopoly on progress?
That's a really sobering thought. We have built the entire modern world on the fundamental assumption that chips will get cheaper and faster forever, if that engine stops.
The whole machine seizes up.
Well, on that cheerful note, I think we have given everyone plenty to chew on.
I would think so.
Next time you pick up your phone, or start your car, or even use your toaster, just take a second to visualize the billions of those nanometer scale switches inside, all firing away. It really is a modern marvel.
It's the most complex machine humanity has ever built, hiding in plain sight.
Thanks for diving in with us.
Thank you.
We'll see you in the next one.